I recently had an experience that I've tried to share using my words and sharing a picture to go with it, because that's how I normally share, is through writing. As I've sat down and I've tried to write to go along with the pictures that I took to go with this experience, nothing was flowing, nothing was coming out right, and I knew that I needed to make a video instead. And I've put it off, and I've tried again to sit down and find my way with writing to share this experience, and there's a mental block. So I am putting this experience into video form for whatever reason. I have no idea, but I'm not as well, I don't know how you would say it, I'm not as well spoken as I am well versed. I don't know if well versed is the right expression either, but when we were on vacation at Disneyland, we were there the second week of September, and on September 11th, my family and I, we were all wearing matching shirts that said Team Deets on the front, and on the back it had our name and a pink Mickey head, and inside the Mickey head was a white cancer ribbon. And we were so proud to wear those shirts. This last year, since my diagnosis, it has felt like Hiroshima or Hiroshima. I'm never really quite sure which one is correct. Where there was this big initial event, and even though it was incredibly shocking, it seemed like we knew exactly what to do. We knew where to go and how to manage this initial, big blow up. But I imagine in the aftermath of Hiroshima that individual families were left to their own devices. It went from one big catastrophic event to sort of an aftermath of confusing circumstances for individual families as they worked through how the event affected them specifically. And that's how it's been for our family. And we find that we are still in survival mode, but in a different way now. And this trip has meant so much to us. We planned it for 17 months, who's counting? And I had so much fun designing these shirts. And we found that we actually didn't want to take them off, and they were mostly white. They looked like baseball jerseys. They were mostly white, and so they all got really dirty, but we didn't want to take them off. And Alice wore hers 2 days in a row. But through going through this experience and planning this vacation, I've also had this prayer in my heart, because I haven't been praying as much. I haven't been reading my scriptures as much. I've been in such survival mode that I've struggled with my spiritual practices. And I've carried, though, constant prayer in my heart for different things. And one thing that I've had a constant prayer about is I've just wanted to find somebody that could relate to what I'm going through. I know that there's support groups, but there's not one anywhere nearby, especially for someone young going through not just breast cancer, but stage 4 breast cancer, which really, it really kind of changes everything. It's a total different experience. And I thought, I don't really, at this point, I don't need a group. I just need even just one person that I could go to and ask questions about my medicine, which, if stage 4 breast cancer that's, triple negative, their experience is going to be totally different than mine. So at this point, someone with just a similar situation or a similar cancer would be awesome. And even with the World Wide Web at my fingertips, I couldn't really find anyone. And I have found that Googling my situation or my medicines is really not helpful, because all that pops up are statistics and horror stories, and do not Google it. Do not Google triple positive stage 4 breast cancer, because it will devastate you even if you aren't diagnosed with it. It's not a good situation. And I needed somebody who was out there thriving and living that could look into my eyes and just say, like, hey, look, I'm out here, I'm living, we're doing this, you know, not necessarily that everything's going to be okay, but I don't know, just connection, empathy, something. And like I said, even with social media at my fingertips and with how involved I am in social media, it's been hard to find somebody, you know. And I started to think that my prayer was, I don't know, unheard. Maybe I didn't deserve to be heard because I wasn't putting in the efforts that I used to with prayer and scripture study. I used to sit like 45 minutes a day in meditation and prayer, and I'm a walking prayer now. Like, anyway, we headed into the park with our matching shirts, and oh gosh, it just felt so good. We really did feel like this team, you know. And Danny stopped by the hotel lobby to talk to them to ask if we could park at the hotel an extra day, because we were checking out Friday morning and we were leaving and spending the day in the park Friday and then leaving Friday night. And we would have to move our car into Disneyland's parking lot, which we could have done, but he, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. He just wanted to stop to see if they could accommodate us one more day and if we could pay the hotel's parking rates, which were significantly cheaper. And he came back out as we waited for him, and he said they more than accommodated us. They are allowing us to stay one more day in the hotel parking lot at no charge whatsoever. And he said I was able to speak to the general manager about our situation and why we were here, and you know, he was wearing his shirt. And so we headed into the park with kind of this, gosh, people are so good, you know, people are amazing. And Disneyland is full of that. I'm sorry, you don't get the same feeling at California Adventure. It just isn't the same. And we headed into the Disneyland park feeling that magic and just the good-naturedness of mankind. And Disneyland is just full of that. And we spent all morning there at the park, and we went back to the hotel to rest in the afternoon, and then we went back to hit the late afternoon evening night shift, because the park didn't close until midnight. And so we were doing really well. We had a good amount of energy. We were feeling so good and just so relieved and so happy to be there, to be together. This was my maiden voyage out of state. And I finished chemo almost a year ago, and I'm glad that I waited to take the trip because my neuropathy has had a chance to improve, and my energy, and I didn't need a scooter through the whole trip. It was just wonderful. Everything about it was, not everything. Of course, we had several meltdowns and a bunch of funny little things that just, again, made me grateful for the good-natured feeling in Disneyland, because people were very patient with a screaming certain child of mine. But as the night wore on, even though we were feeling so good, by the time it hit 10 o'clock, of course the park wasn't closing till midnight, and we wanted to stay until midnight, but we were dragging. And we decided to get in line for the Peter Pan ride. And as we got in line, I noticed a few groups ahead of us. There was this woman, and I instantly kind of started to judge her because she was in her 70s, probably. I couldn't really tell because she had on a wig, and it wasn't, I could tell it was a wig because I've worn wigs and I know what good quality wigs look like. And I don't know if it was, maybe not obviously a wig, but it was this platinum blonde wig. And she'd obviously had a lot of work done on her face, and she reminded me of Dolly Parton, minus the, maybe chest size. But she she had the same kind of look, and as I started to judge her, I checked myself and I decided to not and to just watch her. And so I did. I just watched this woman. And the line for Peter Pan, it weaves really, it's quite a maze. And I watched her and I noticed she was alone. And I thought that she was with a group of people by the way that she was connecting with the people around her. But as I continued to watch her, I realized she was not here with a group. She was at Disneyland at 10 o'clock at night, then 10:30 at night, all by herself. And she was going around and she was talking to everybody that was close to her. And she was making their lives better. And then I started watching the people that she was talking to. And I could see the way that they would change after she would talk to them. She would go to somebody who was really weary and tired. And, with a family, with little kids, it's 10 o'clock, it's 10:30 at night. They're worn out. She would visit with them, and after she turned away, their postures would improve. The corners of their mouths would kind of lift and soften, and then she would go to another group. And because of the way the lines went, she was a few groups ahead of us, but we actually ended up right next to her at one point. And she said, "What does Dietz mean?" And we got that question a lot, actually. I guess it's not very obvious that Dietz is a last name. And she asked us, "What does Dietz mean?" And I said, "It's our last name." And she said, "Oh, I thought it was some kind of slang for very good-looking people," which was so nice. And then my posture lifted and the corners of my mouth turned up a little, and she turned away from us, and then she turned back around after a minute, and she just put her hands in her one arm. She says, "Why don't you call yourself the Darling Dietz?" And then she was still thinking about it, and she turned back around. And she turned around one last time before moving ahead in line, and she rubbed Alice's arm, and I was holding Alice because she was really tired. And she said, "Your family is really just so beautiful." And she walked away, and all of us could feel a difference. And we went through the line feeling relaxed and peaceful and calm. And I watched her as she got into the little ship, the tiny little ship that you ride in the Peter Pan ride, all by herself. I watched the worker, and I watched her say something to the worker. And as her ship moved on, I could see the workers standing up straight and the corners of their mouth lifting and softening. And so through the whole ride, I kept thinking, what a difference one person can make in life. I thought, does she wait until 10 o'clock on a weekday night and get dressed and then come to Disneyland? And why was she wearing a wig? Is she wearing a wig for the same reason I was wearing a wig a year ago? And is this what she's choosing to do with her time? I don't know. But it was really inspiring to me. And I got off the ride feeling this I just wanted to sit with it. This very peaceful, calm, almost tingly feeling that this woman had given not just me, but everyone around her. And by the time we left the ride, it was 11 o'clock. And Danny said, "Let's go ride the Mad Hatter ride. There's not a very long line." And I said, "I really don't want to. Let's ride something softer." I wanted to continue to just feel this feeling. I'm like, "What about the carousel right here?" And he said, "You know what? No, let's go ride the Mad Hatter ride. The line is short. We've been wanting to ride it. Let's do it." And he had been anxious to get our little Alice to Wonderland anyway. And so we hopped in line and we rode the ride, which I tried to not let it take me out of my tingly zen feeling that this woman had given me. And is such a loud, colorful ride. And it was really, really fun. And by the time we got out of that ride, it was now about 11:30, and we didn't know where to go or what to do next. And we were kind of making plans. What should we do? Where should we go? And we got off the ride, and there was a woman standing there, and she stopped us and she said, "Where did you get your shirts?" And I said, "Oh, they were made by a woman in my hometown. We live in this tiny town in Arizona, and she makes them, kind of at her house, and I can give you the information." And she said, "The thing is," and I thought, she must know somebody that has cancer. And she said, "The thing is, I have cancer, and I was wanting shirts like that for me and my son." And she pointed to this boy. He was about 8, and he was just running around in a gift shop nearby. And she's young. This woman's young. And I couldn't believe that she also had breast cancer. Not that I have a hard time believing young people don't, because they do. I just never see them. I never see young people with breast cancer. I hear about them. They're like unicorns. And I said, you do? And she says, "Yeah, well, I did. I mean, I'm what the doctors call very stage 4. I'm also what they call radical remission." And she pulled up her phone and she showed me her PET scans, her PET scan before. And you can just see in the scan that she was absolutely riddled. You could just see the cancer from, her neck clear down to her thigh. And I'm assuming it probably went, even farther down her legs. And then she showed me her PET scan for after she'd had her treatment, and it was clear. It was completely clear. And she said, "The doctors told my husband I had a month to live, but luckily they didn't tell me that." And she said that was 6 years ago. And as we got to talking, this woman has a very similar kind of breast cancer to mine. Hers is not hormone positive, so she doesn't have to do hormone treatments like I do. But we are taking the same medicine through, I'm tapping my port here, not like you can see it. Anyway, right? Where's my port? Where'd she go? As I've gained weight, she's kind of hidden herself there. She's right there. It's Portia. We take the same medicine through our ports, it's called Herceptin. And so as we talked and she realized that we had the same HER2 positive type breast cancer, she said, "I need to tell you something. I need you to know that the doctor I see, she doesn't treat patients. She's actually heavily into research for curing cancer. So that's what her career is. She is working on a cure, and she treats patients on the side, and I'm one of her patients. And I need you to know that she has about 6 treatments in her back pocket that are just waiting to hit the market, and you just need to hold on. You just got to hold on." And I had said, "Well, when the cancer comes back," and she just held out her hand, and Lacey was standing there, my 12-year-old, and Lacey keeps saying, "If the cancer comes back, if," and I had to tell her the other day, "Honey, it's when, like, I'm stage 4, so this is going to come back." And it was like, it was hard to watch, because I thought that she'd understood that. I thought that we had explained it, and we hadn't. And I just mentioned that to this woman, and she just hugged Lacey, and she said, it's always if. And so the statistics for a woman with stage 4 breast cancer, if you'll forgive the pun, are kind of lumped into one big category of just stage 4 breast cancer as a whole. It doesn't take into account the different types. The prognosis is very grim, and that's why I don't look up anything. And this woman said the same thing to me. She said, "Don't do research. If you get sick, don't go to Google. Talk to your doctor with anything, even if it's just a cold. Don't Google medicines or supplements. Take it to your doctors." And I said, I don't know how to find a support group. And she's like, there really isn't one. There really isn't a good solid one for those of us living with this type of cancer. And she pointed to her son and she said, that's my support group right there. And that's honestly all I really need. And she really reiterated the importance of my mindset. And it was such a beautiful experience. I was able to connect with her online and to know that there's somebody I can go to with questions about medicine that's like been through it. I can go and say, what can I expect with this? And she did say she'd had a slight recurrence last summer. And because I'd asked her if she'd had surgery, because I feel a little bit weird that I haven't. I feel like breast cancer and surgery go hand in hand, but I feel like I shouldn't have surgery right now. And then I think, am I crazy? So I just asked her. I'd been dying to ask somebody, you know, have you had surgery? And she said, no. Why would I have had surgery? The cancer's dead. And she goes, well, I had a little bit of a surgery last summer. I had a slight recurrence. And she goes, the doctors just scooped it right out and I didn't even have to have any radiation, or they just switched up her, she goes, they switched up my medicine a little bit and I'm not sick or anything. And she just said, this is all my son knows is me like this. And she was very healthy. I mean, she was at Disneyland at 11:30 at night. And so we exchanged information online, and then eventually we made it back to our hotel room. And as we walked through the park, we were just, you know, that definitely was not coincidental. It was a very, very loud answer to some, I don't know what the word is, desperate prayers that I've had, constant prayers that I've had. It just, what are the odds, you know, of all the people? And she also did happen to tell me that her doctor was the assistant to the person who created Herceptin, which is powerful information as well. But to have this resource, this person, was amazing. And we were just sort of walking quietly, silently almost, my husband and I. The kids weren't silent, of course, because as you walk down Main Street at midnight, how can you be silent? Main Street in Disneyland. But my husband and I were feeling the reverence of the occasion, and we walked into, we stayed at Best Western Park Place right across the street from Disneyland Park. But as luck would have it, our hotel room was on the top floor, the farthest from, so it was like the farthest room from the park you could possibly get, which was fine, but it made us laugh. So we walked up 3 flights of stairs, or we rode the elevator or something, and we walked all the way back, and we opened our hotel room, and we flipped on the lights, and sitting on our table was a Martinelli with a tag on it that said, "Go live it up." From the general manager of the hotel. And my husband just picked it up and he said, I think God's trying to tell you something today, babe. So this is my Sabbath testimony to everybody of just how active and aware God is, even if you're not praying every day. Even if you failed on President Nelson's challenge to read the Book of Mormon, even though you had no excuse because you were down in bed recovering from chemo, that God's aware and he's taking care of you and desires nothing more than to be with you and to sorrow with you, and that he hears you and he will communicate with you in not just his language, but mostly in yours. at a time when it will mean the most to you. So that is my testimony that God lives, and I say it in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.